In the first year. Not the first year of a king's reign. Not the first year of a calendar. The first year. Of everything. A creature rose from the Erythraean Sea, the body of water bordering ancient Babylonia, and walked into the city. It had the whole body of a fish. But under the fish's head, it had another head. A human head. And beneath the fish's tail, human feet. It had a human voice. And it spoke. It spent its days among the people of Babylonia. It taught them writing, mathematics, architecture, law, agriculture, city building, temple construction. Everything that would become the foundation of human civilization, it taught to the people of Babylonia before any of it existed anywhere on earth. And then, when the sun set, it walked back into the sea. Every day. For years. And the one detail that Berossus, the Babylonian priest who documented this, recorded most carefully, was not its appearance. Not its knowledge. Not its origin. It was this. It passed the day in the midst of men without taking food. It looked almost human. It spoke human language. It lived among human beings. But it did not eat. And that was the one trait that gave it away. Welcome to the Shadow Ancestral. Tonight we go into one of the most documented and least discussed subjects in the entire ancient Near Eastern record. The beings the Sumerians and Babylonians described as living among humans, before the flood, and after it. Beings that looked like humans. Spoke like humans. Taught civilization to humans. But were not human. Every claim in this episode is sourced from museum collections, peer-reviewed academic papers, and the documented writings of ancient historians whose work has been cited for over 2,000 years. Subscribe right now if you are new here. Hit the notification bell. Before we go further, understand something about this channel. Every claim we make is sourced. Every tablet we reference is real. Every story we tell is verified. There is no other channel doing this at this level. Subscribe. And find out why. Now, let us go back to the beginning. To the first documented encounter between humanity, and something that was not. Before we read the description, you need to understand who wrote it. And why it matters. Berossus was a Babylonian priest of the god Bel-Marduk, who served at the Esagila temple in Babylon during the early Seleucid period. Around 290 BCE, he wrote a three-book history of Mesopotamia in Greek, called the Babylonia, dedicated to the Seleucid king Antiochus I Soter. Almost all of it is lost. What survives, approximately 2% of the original, is preserved in fragments cited by three separate ancient historians, Alexander Polyhistor, Eusebius, and Josephus. Berossus was not a storyteller. He was a priest of the most important temple in the most powerful empire of the ancient world. He had access to the temple archives. The classified texts. The Nizirtu, the hidden things, that we covered in episode 7. What he wrote about was not mythology. He was transmitting to the Greek-speaking world the contents of cuneiform temple records that had been maintained for over 2,000 years before he was born. And what those records described, as documented by Satiri's academic analysis of the Berossus fragments, was the appearance, behavior, and teaching of a specific group of beings called the Apkallu. The 7 sages. Who were not human. And who, for a specific period of time, lived among human beings. Teaching them everything. While never, not once, eating their food. The first of the 7 sages had a name. Oannes. In Sumerian, Oannes. In Akkadian, Oannes. Berossus described his appearance in terms that have confused and fascinated researchers for over 2,000 years. The Levius.org translation, drawing directly on Polyhistor's preserved fragment of Berossus, reads as follows. It had the whole body of a fish. But underneath and attached to the head of the fish there was another head, human. And joined to the tail of the fish, feet like those of a man. It had a human voice. 2 heads. 1 fish. 1 human. The fish head on the outside. The human head beneath it. Human feet at the base of the fish tail. The spoken past academic article on Mesopotamian Apkallu iconography documents what the Bit Mesri texts, the Neo-Assyrian incantation series, describe as the first physical type. Humanoid figures wearing the skin of a carp, the parada fish, draped over their heads. 2 interpretations have existed in scholarship for over a century. The first, that Oannes was a literal fish-human hybrid being. The second, that he wore a fish skin cloak as a ceremonial garment, appearing human underneath, with the fish skin draped over him as a marker of his origin from the Apsu. Both interpretations agree on one thing. Whatever Oannes was, he looked different from the humans around him. And there was one behavior that made that difference impossible to ignore. Berossus recorded it as a specific detail, preserved across every fragment that survived the loss of the Babylonia. He passed the day in the midst of men without taking food. He lived among them. He taught them. He spoke their language. But he did not eat. Every day, at sunset, he walked back into the sea. And returned the next morning. The academic article on Oannes at godsandmonsters.info, drawing on documented Mesopotamian scholarship, notes this detail with precision. He does not eat with them, which is another boundary drawn in flesh. A boundary drawn in flesh. Not in law. Not in custom. Not in language. In the body itself. The one thing that separated Oannes from the humans he lived among, was what he did not consume. The description of Oannes is not the only physical account preserved in the cuneiform record. The Dutch Assyriologist Frans Wiggerman of the Free University of Amsterdam produced what Spoken Past describes as the landmark analysis of Apkallu iconography, his 1992 monograph Mesopotamian Protective Spirits, the Ritual Texts, published in the Cuneiform Monograph series. Wiggerman identified 3 distinct physical types of Apkallu, confirmed both in the ritual texts and in excavated figurines. Type 1. The fish-cloaked being. Humanoid figures wearing the skin of the parada fish, the carp, draped over their heads. This is the type described by Berossus in the account of Oannes. The type buried under Assyrian palace floors in clay figurine form as protective spirits. Type 2. The bird-headed being. In 1849, French consul Paul-Émile Botta shipped enormous alabaster slabs from the ruins of Dersharukin, the palace of Assyrian king Sargon II near modern Khorsabad in Iraq, to the Louvre in Paris. Carved into those slabs, documented by Spoken Past, were winged figures nearly 2 meters tall. Each had the head of a bird. A bucket in one hand. A pine cone in the other. Standing guard. Flanking doorways. Positioned at thresholds. The Louvre had never seen anything like them. Type 3. Fully human figures. Bearded. Wingless. Indistinguishable in appearance from the human sages, the Umanu, who came after the flood. This third type is the most disturbing of the 3. Because if the first type gave itself away by appearance, and the second type could never have passed as human, the third type could walk among humans and be identified only by that one specific behavior. The one Berossus recorded so carefully. The one trait. That they did not eat. We are at the halfway point. And what comes next is the documented record of what the Apkallu actually taught, and what the cuneiform texts describe about the transition from divine sages to human sages. The moment when the beings that did not eat among humans, went back inside. And left humanity to continue with only the memory of what they had been taught. Subscribe to the Shadow Ancestral right now. There is no other channel doing this at this level. Every episode is sourced. Every claim is verified. Subscribe. Hit the bell. Now, what they taught. The Grokopedia academic entry on the Apkallu, drawing on cuneiform scholarship, documents the Uruk list of kings and sages. A cuneiform tablet. Catalog number W200307. This tablet pairs each of the 7 sages with a corresponding antediluvian king. The first sage, Oannes, also known as Oannes, was paired with Apkallu, the very first king on the Sumerian king list. The first king of the first city. Eridu. The task assigned to the sages in this tablet is described in specific cuneiform language as ensuring, and these are the exact words: the correct execution of the plans of heaven and earth. Not worship. Not ceremony. Not religious service. The correct execution of the plans of heaven and earth. A technical task. An engineering task. A civilizational task. Berossus documented what Oannes specifically taught to the people of Babylon in those daily visits from the sea. Letters. Sciences. Arts of all kinds. How to construct cities. How to found temples. How to compile laws. The principles of geometrical knowledge. How to distinguish the seeds of the earth. How to collect fruits. And Berossus added one extraordinary line that is rarely quoted in full. From that time, nothing material has been added by way of improvement to his instructions. Nothing material added. Everything that human civilization has ever produced, everything we have built, every law we have written, every city we have constructed, was improved from the foundation Oannes laid in those daily visits from the sea. Not added to in any fundamental way. Just, improved. The Demonology Wiki on the Apkallu, citing cuneiform sources, notes that the era epic specifically asks, where are the 7 sages of the Apsu, the pure parada fish, who just as their lord Ea have been endowed with sublime wisdom? Not past tense. Not, where were they? Where are they? As if whoever wrote those words believed they were still somewhere. Still in the Apsu. Still waiting. The 7 sages lived among humans before the flood. All 7 of them. Named. Documented. Each paired with a specific pre-flood king. And then the flood came. And they went back. Back through the door. Back into the Apsu. Back to Enki. The Samis. Academic analysis of the Bit-Mesri cuneiform series documents what happened next with extraordinary precision. There was a special quality connected to wisdom from before the flood, and this was the wisdom brought to humankind through the Apkallu. The king needed access to this kind of higher wisdom, which included insight into the divine secrets, in order to reign. After the flood, a new category of sage appeared. Not divine. Not fish-cloaked. Not bird-headed. Human. Called the Umanu, the craftsman scholars. The Wikipedia article on the Apkallu, drawing on cuneiform scholarship, documents the transition plainly. Post-deluge, the sages are considered human, and in some texts are distinguished by being referred to as Umanu, not Apkallu. Different word. Different category. Different nature. The Umanu inherited the functions of the Apkallu. But they were not the Apkallu. They ate. They aged. They died. And the wisdom they carried, the Samis. Analysis notes, was a transmission. A reduced copy. Of what the original sages had known. The same way a photocopy carries the information of the original, but loses something in the reproduction. The Apkallu did not age. The Apkallu did not die. The Apkallu did not eat. And when they left, what they took with them into the Apsu, was the full original. What they left behind, was everything that human civilization has been working with ever since. Here is the detail that takes this from ancient text into physical evidence you can hold. The spoken past article on Mesopotamian Apkallu, drawing on Wigerman's landmark analysis, documents a practice that Assyrian kings maintained for centuries. They buried clay figurines of the Apkallu under the floors of their palaces. Not as decoration. Not as art. As protection. The Bit-Mesri texts, the Neo-Assyrian incantation series documented by Reichel Borger, describe exactly how these figurines were to be made and placed. The texts specify, fish-man hybrids painted with gypsum and black paste. Bird-headed figures. Human-form sages. All three types. Placed at doorways. At the head of beds. Beneath the floors of rooms. The Bit-Meseri text describes their purpose in specific language. To the 7 figures of Paradu Apkallu, painted with gypsum and black paste, that are drawn at the side of the bedroom at the wall. Why would Assyrian kings, the most powerful rulers in the ancient world, bury representations of these beings beneath their floors? Because the Apkallu were understood, not as mythological figures, but as actual protective presences that could be invoked through accurate physical representation. The figurine had to match the documented description. The fish cloak had to be correct. The bird head had to be accurate. Because if it was wrong, it would not work. Inaccurate representations of beings with documented physical forms were useless. Which means the physical forms were considered to be real. Specific. Known. And the one form that had to be most carefully represented was the one that could pass as human. The fully human Apkallu. The one you could not identify by appearance alone. The one you could only identify by watching whether it ate. The Apkallu were not the only beings the Sumerian texts describe as distinct from humanity while living in the same world. The Anunnaki, the Great Divine Council, are described in cuneiform sources with specific physical characteristics that distinguish them from humans. The Mythlock academic documentation of the Anunnaki describes this precisely. They are depicted as anthropomorphic beings of imposing scale, distinguished from humans by horned crowns that signify divinity and hierarchical rank. Many representations emphasize an overwhelming radiance, expressed through the concept of melam. Melam. A specific Sumerian word for a sacred brilliance, believed to inspire awe, fear, and physical sensation in mortals who came near it. This was not metaphor. In the cuneiform texts, melam is described as a physical phenomenon. Something you could feel as well as see. An emanation from the divine body that human bodies did not produce. Cylinder seals and reliefs, documented across multiple Mesopotamian periods, show the Anunnaki with richly layered garments, elaborate jewelry, horn crowns, and in some periods, wings or hybrid features. The Mythlock analysis notes, these visual conventions evolved over time but consistently presented the Anunnaki as beings whose presence reshaped the environment around them. 2 markers. For the Apkallu, the one trait was behavioral. They did not eat. For the Anunnaki, the one trait was physical. They emitted melam. A radiance. A brilliance. That human beings did not possess and could not simulate. You could not fake it. You could not learn it. You could not acquire it. Either you had it, or you were human. Let us return to Berossus. To the full account. Because there is a detail in the preserved fragment that is almost never read out loud. The Levius.org translation of the Berossus passage preserved in Polyhistor includes this description of what came after Oannes. Later other monsters similar to Oannes appeared, about whom Berossus gave more information in his writings on the kings. Other monsters. Similar to Oannes. Not one being. Not one visit. A series of beings. Over time. Each documented by Berossus in his writings on the kings. And then Berossus records what those beings described as the state of the world before they arrived. Asterisk, there was a time when the universe was only darkness and water. And in it there were wondrous beings with peculiar forms who were able to engender other living beings. For men with 2 wings were born. As were others with 4 wings and 2 faces. Some had 1 body but 2 heads, male and female, and 2 sets of sexual organs. Further, there were other men with the legs of goats and the horns of goats on their heads. Asterisk. This is not mythology in the casual sense of the word. This is Berossus, a trained Babylonian priest, transmitting to Greek audiences the contents of temple archives that described what the world looked like before the current order. Before the Anunnaki established the cosmic structure we covered in episode 5. Before the dome separated the heavenly ocean above from the earth below. Before Marduk wiped the record and wrote the Enuma Elish on top of what had been there before. What Berossus was describing, through Oannes, was a period when the categories were not fixed. When the boundary between fish and human, between divine and mortal, between the water and the land, had not yet been sealed. And Oannes, who came from that older order, who carried that older knowledge, who had existed before the categories hardened, came to the shore of the world as it was now, walked among its people, taught them everything, and gave himself away by only one thing. He did not eat. There were 7 sages. All 7 came before the flood. All 7 lived among humans. All 7 taught. And all 7, except one, went back into the Abzu when the flood came. The 7th sage was named Utu-Abzu. The spoken past academic article documents what happened to him differently from the others. The 7th sage, Utu-Abzu, unlike his predecessors, was taken directly to heaven rather than returning to the Apsu. Not back into the water. Up. To heaven. Why the 7th sage went to heaven rather than the Abzu, the texts do not say directly. But the Grokopedia entry on the Apkallu, drawing on the Uruk list of kings and sages, notes that the 7 sages completed something with the 7th one. Something finished. Something closed. And rather than returning to where the others went, he went somewhere else entirely. The account of 7 sages, one of whom went to heaven, while the others returned to the deep water, left humanity with a question that the texts never fully answer. If 6 went back into the Abzu, and 1 went to heaven, where are they now? The Era epic asked it directly. Where are the 7 sages of the Apsu? Present tense. As if the answer was supposed to be obvious. As if they were somewhere that could still be found. In the Abzu. Behind the door. With Enki. Waiting. As we covered in episode 8 and episode 11. The door is sealed. But the ground at Eridu is still there. And the water is returning to the threshold. Let us return to the one trait. Because it is more significant than it first appears. The godsandmonsters.info article on Oannes describes it precisely. He does not eat with them, which is another boundary drawn in flesh. In the ancient world, eating together was not casual. It was covenant. It was community. It was the most fundamental act of being part of the same group. To eat another's food was to share their life. To accept their world. To become part of their order. When Oannes refused to eat, he was not making a dietary choice. He was maintaining a boundary. Between the order he came from, and the order he was teaching. He could give them everything he knew. He could speak their language. He could walk in their world. But he could not cross the one threshold that would have made him one of them. The research paper published on ResearchGate, Fish or Man, Babylonian or Greek. Oannes Between Cultures, describes him as by nature not man. Despite the human head. Despite the human feet. Despite the human voice. By nature, not man. And the evidence for that, in the daily life of Babylon, was visible to anyone who watched him long enough. He never sat down to eat. This is your formula for identification, embedded in the oldest documented encounter between humanity and something that was not. Not the wings. Not the fish skin. Not the melum radiance. The meal he did not share. Berossus documented them in 290 BCE. Drawing on temple archives that had been maintained for over 2,000 years. 7 beings. Not human. Who came before the flood and taught humanity everything. They had fish skin, or bird heads, or the appearance of fully human men that you could not distinguish from the people around them. Except by one thing. They did not eat. Their figurines are still being excavated from under the floors of Assyrian palaces in Iraq. Their names are still in the cuneiform tablets at the British Museum, at the Penn Museum, at the Oriental Institute in Chicago. Their physical descriptions are documented in academic monographs that have been in print for over 30 years. And the era epic, written in cuneiform, still asks the question in present tense. Where are the 7 sages of the Apsu? If this video opened something in you, subscribe to the Shadow Ancestral right now. Leave a comment. What do you think the Apkallu actually were? Beings from another realm? Memory of a real pre-flood civilization? Or something the tablets describe that we still do not have a framework for? Share this with someone who has never heard the name Oannes. Next week, we go to the one thing the 7 sages were told never to teach humanity. The knowledge Enki withheld. The peace that was never passed on. And the one tablet that describes what happens when a human being discovers it anyway. The shadow has more to show you. Watch who does not eat at your table.